Yeah.
All right, hi, tiny people at home. Here we go. Let's see what we can talk about today. We have Petersburg and Atlanta in the summer of 1864. Remember what we talked about yesterday was that the Army of the Potomac under George Meade, but Ulysses Grant was actually the guy leading it. They're coming down, 120,000 men, an extra 40,000 on each side of 200,000 men coming down against Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee's army is back to full strength, which is about 65,000 men. This is as big as it will get. You can't really get any more replacements. Then you have over in the west, William Sherman coming with 100,000 men, 40,000 extra on each side. That's 180,000 men coming against Joe Johnston, who has about the same number of soldiers, about 65,000. So this is going to be the end. All right, cool. So what happens here? We said they started marching on March 5th, or excuse me, May 5th, 1865. Now down they go, they are pushing it, 1864, excuse me, they're pushing it along. We're just talking about right now heading towards what's going to be the Battle of Petersburg. It starts in the wilderness. Remember, they left May 4th? Well, here, May 5th and 6th, they're already in battle because Ulysses Grant does not want to stop. He wants to get there and kill Confederates. Remember, 2 ways to win the war: kill the enemy's economy, kill the enemy's army. They're still doing the Anaconda plan to kill the economy, but now they're also just trying to kill Confederate soldiers. This is huge. This is enormous. This is massively important. Ulysses Grant comes down. Robert E. Lee says, holy smokes, this is a lot of soldiers coming at me. How can I help to neutralize their advantage in numbers? And Lee's a very clever guy. He said, I'm going to wait for them to come to a place which was called the wilderness, which was really thick woods. And through these really thick woods, it would be impossible to move troops of men spread out. They kind of have to narrow down onto a couple of roads going through there. One in particular big thing. Well, they're going to come down. Now think about it. If Hamza decides he's going to fight 47 guys, if he tries to go out in the middle of a field and fight 47 guys, Hamza's going to be nothing but a spot on the floor and a memory. He's going to get killed. However, if Hamza says, I need to neutralize their advantage, I'm going to stand in a doorway. Now, only 1 or 2 of them can be fighting me at the same time. I don't care if they have 800 out there. They can only fight me with 1 or 2 at a time. That's what Robert E. Lee is doing. He's saying, come on down, Union, but you got to get filtered through into this little small area. They fight. Lee beats him. He just flat out beats him. This is a complete Confederate victory. Here's the most important thing Ulysses Grant ever does. He comes down out of Washington, D.C. Everybody look at me for a second. He comes down out of Washington, D.C. He fights at the wilderness. He is beaten. He backs up. He turns, goes around the Army of Northern Virginia, and goes back south again. All of a sudden, the morale in the Army of the Potomac goes through the roof. It's fantastic because they realize what this guy is doing. All the other Union generals, they came down into Virginia. Robert E. Lee beat them, and then they retreated all the way back up to Washington. What did they have to do the next time they came down? Fight for the same ground over again. Grant says, hey, woo, this guy is good. That was a great battle plan. Good job, Robert E. Lee. Now I'm just going to keep going. I want to fight you again. I want to kill some more of your army. So now these Northern soldiers realize we're not going back up to Washington to train. We're not going to spend more months or weeks or years or even days up there. We're carrying it to the South. We're going to defeat these guys now. Suddenly they realize there's going to be an end to this war, and Grant's the guy to do it. All right. So he pulls around. May 5th and 6th was the wilderness. May 8th and 9th through the 19th, they're back into another huge battle. Spotsylvania. Yes, boss?
So when you're writing the wilderness in like essay or something.
Wait, I can't hear you. What?
When you're writing the wilderness in an essay, where you write like, and they went to the wilderness in capital T.
You can just do with a capital W. The wilderness. That'd be okay. All right. Let me see here. Ooh. The easiest way to do this is just using a couple of boys, so I will use a couple of boys. Okay. You two. simplest way to do this. Daniel here, James here. Right here, right here, right here. You're facing each other. Okay? A little bit closer. One step closer. Okay. Put your arms out. Okay. Hang on just a second. Remember, any army is divided really into three parts when it's set for battle. You have the center, clearly. And then this area over here, as the commander faces it, this would be considered his right flank. This would be considered his left flank, flank meaning side. And they make their battle plans according to where they think the weakness of the enemy is. Well, Spotsylvania was very unique. Just so happened that both commanders picked the same battle plan for the same moment. What they actually did was, you're going to take my right flank and attack his left. At the same time that Lee said, this is really nice, kind of a blue gray. That Lee said, okay, I'm going to take my right flank and attack your left flank. And they actually turn around 180 degrees. Go around each other. We're not doing dance. Okay? They actually ended up in each other's trenches. They actually just spun the armies around 180 degrees because they both attacked the same way. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Okay.
So, never mind.
Now, it's not that I think you guys are grubby, but I'll use my, this is technical. Yes, I think they're grubby. No, not really. All right. Cool. Lee gets what's virtually his last replacements. He'll get a few stragglers after this, but this is the last time he gets an organized group of, here you go, here's some more soldiers. And they're coming by taking them off of other smaller armies. So they're really reducing the smaller Confederate armies to almost nothing. Next big battle, they keep fighting every day. I mean, even if we can only kill 100 Confederates today in little skirmishes, we've got to keep killing Confederates. Every day they're fighting. They're following the Army of Northern Virginia. Another big battle at Cold Harbor. Cold Harbor, boy, Grant understands the arithmetic of war, and this is where sometimes he gets a reputation as being kind of, didn't care how many men he got killed. This is not true. Grant was a good general. This was a bad idea to do his last charge. He even says, I've always regretted that the last assault at Cold Harbor was ever made. Because the last assault at Cold Harbor, he attacks, and Grant loses 8,000 men in 8 minutes. It is not a good plan of attack. But he's killing Confederates. And remember the arithmetic of war. When one side has such a huge numerical advantage, it really doesn't matter if they're winning or losing as long as they're killing enemy soldiers, because the enemy's going to run out of soldiers before the first side does. So they're going to win the war, even if they're losing battles. All right. Robert E. Lee says, man, I can't shake this guy. This Grant guy, he won't retreat. He won't go back to Washington. No matter how many times I beat him, he's just staying on my tail. I got to figure out what I'm going to do. So Robert E. Lee takes his army into the fortified city of Petersburg, Virginia, which is actually a little bit past Richmond. But remember, they were going towards Richmond only so Lee would fight him. The Union was. Well, now they're in this fortified town. Well, they're in the fortified town of Petersburg. And this is actually a picture of the fortifications of Petersburg. I mean, they're pretty well dug in. The Confederates are. This is the last thing that Ulysses Grant wants. Oh, man. The idea of another siege is repulsive to him. His goal is to kill Confederates. If he's standing outside waiting for them to starve, then this thing could go on for weeks or maybe even months. That's not what he wants, because remember, last summer, he spent at the siege of Vicksburg. Grant doesn't do well sitting around just waiting for the action to happen. Well, there were a group of miners from Pennsylvania, not people under 18. Miners, M-I-N-E-R-S. Guys that dig in the ground and find cool stuff. Miners from Pennsylvania. And they said, hey, General Grant, we have a plan. And he said, tell me about it. I said, okay. They've got these big walls and fortifications at Petersburg. We're miners. Now, if an army tries to cross over there, they're going to get shot to pieces. But what if we went under the open field? What if we dug ourselves a mine shaft from way over here in the Union lines, and we went all the way underground until we were under the walls of Petersburg? Now, the walls of Petersburg are 15, 20 feet high. We'll dig underneath that. Then we'll put all kinds of explosives in here. And when we get the explosives all set, we'll come back out. We're ready with our fuse. Now, you pick the time you want the attack to happen. During the night, we'll move some soldiers out as far as we can. And first thing in the morning, you give us the word. We'll light the fuse. The fuse will shoot out through there. It'll hit the explosives. There will be this massive explosion. The walls of Petersburg will be torn apart. The soldiers will stand up and race through this hole in the wall because the Confederates won't be ready for this, and the shock and awe of having this big explosion, there really won't be much of a defense. So our army will pour into the center of Petersburg, and then we can win the battle. We'll be inside before they even are ready to react. It sounded like a good plan. Grant said, let's do it. Okay, this is why you listen to Mr. Arvold. Well, you listen to him because he's daddy. But you have to listen to Mr. Arvold because you can't make a math error. The Pennsylvania miners made a mathematical error. They dug under the ground, and they dug the tunnel a little bit short. So here you have these 15, 20-foot walls around Petersburg. They came and they dug the tunnel and put the explosives in front of the wall instead of underneath the wall. They moved the army forward at night under cover of darkness. He gave the signal. They lit the fuse. Huge explosion. But instead of blowing away the wall, it blew a huge crater in the ground. The walls were still good, only now instead of being 15 or 20 feet high, there was a 20, 30-foot crater. They were 40 or 50 feet high. So the Union Army, with all this explosion and dirt and dust there, couldn't tell what they were doing. They stood up and they ran into this crater. And of course, they ran down the hill and they thought they'd be coming up on the other side into Petersburg. And instead, they came up against the wall. And you guys have seen what it's like, you know, when you get people pushed against the wall and more people coming behind them and they're pinned in there. And it was just target practice for the Confederates. The Confederates up above are just shooting these guys. There's nothing they can do about it. They're being pushed from behind. It took a while to figure out, hey, this is a trap. Let's get out of here. We can't get into Petersburg. And lots of soldiers lost their life. This part of the Battle of Petersburg is called the agony in the crater. That's what this is called. This is what we're going to watch, a reenactment of this when we watch the movie tomorrow, a reenactment of the agony in the crater. So, yes, sir.
Aren't we gonna watch it today?
No. I thought about that at first, but we're going to do the explanation, going to get ready, then we will just be set for tomorrow. Holmes is going to bring popcorn and soda for everybody, goobers, raisinets, no?
I'm not sure if I have it enough stock for that. I
Okay,
probably do have Pepsi.
okay, well, no, we won't make you bring it. Gus's dorsal fin came up. Gus has got kind of a sharp thing going. Anytime there's food, he's ready. Okay, here we go. What's happening over in the West? In the West, Joe Johnston is being pursued by William Sherman and his 180,000 men. And Joe Johnston is stopping and fighting frequently, but he's also trying to get away. He's in the same position Robert E. Lee was, which is, I can't get this guy off my tail. He won't go away. He won't stop killing parts of my army. I'm trying to escape so I can come back and have a battle where I have some kind of an advantageous position instead of just running away trying not to be killed. I don't think I told this class. I think it was a different class I told. But one of the most remarkable things about military people is how much they respect each other. Even people on other sides in a conflict, these guys were the bitterest of enemies. I mean, but respectful to each other. They admired each other, but they fought for all the rest of the war. These two men were the commanders of the two sides. And some years after the Civil War, when William Sherman died, Joe Johnston was one of his pallbearers. And they said, why would you do that? And he said, because he'd do it for me. And they weren't exactly friends, but they so respected each other. Kind of an amazing thing. All right. So Joe Johnston does the same thing Robert E. Lee had done. He runs into a fortified city. In this case, Joe Johnston runs into the fortified city of Atlanta. So there's the other big Confederate army under siege by William Sherman's army in Atlanta. The first big Confederate army is under siege by Grant's army over in Petersburg. And the whole thing just settles down to a wait. And it looks like it's going to be more weeks, more months. The war is going to carry on. The election of 1864 is coming up. Here you have Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, not a popular guy. Remember, he was not a real popular president until after his assassination. And his opponent is Democrat George McClellan, who's still popular with those guys who were in the Army of the Potomac, whom he trained and turned into a first-rate fighting force. This looks like it's going to be a tough election for Lincoln. Well, Joe Johnston, he's a smart man politically. It's interesting because he's a general, he's a military man, and he understood the politics better than Jefferson Davis, who was a politician and not a military man. Joe Johnston said, hey, President Davis, we want to stay exactly where we are. We want to keep these things in sieges because the people up north are sick to death of this war. And if we just bog down so that nothing's happening and it looks like it's going to keep going, the people of the north are going to elect George McClellan. And George McClellan said he will seek an honorable peace. He's going to let us go. He's going to sign a treaty where we become a separate nation and we will win this war and our independence. But Jefferson Davis, who was a politician, said, no, I want a more active defense of Atlanta. So he said, Joe Johnston, I order you to attack this army. And Joe Johnston said, okay, I'm down to like 50,000 guys. He still has 180,000 guys. And you're asking me to come out of this fortified city and attack him. You're an idiot. Now, he didn't actually say to the president, you're an idiot, but that's kind of the idea he was getting. It's like, you can't be serious. We can win the war if we just sit in here and you demand that I go out there. Well, the thing about that is the president gets the final say. So Jefferson Davis fired Joe Johnston. He said, I'm removing you from command. You're out. And in his place for the defense of Atlanta, he put this guy, John Bell Hood. Oops. Oh, there's two L's. John Bell Hood. Now, John Bell Hood, he was a gambling man. He was a gambler. He didn't mind taking a risk. He had once bet $2,500. That's maybe $100,000 today. He bet $2,500 on a hand of poker, and he didn't even have a pair. He had nothing. And the other guy folded, and he won. So he was willing to take a chance. So when Jefferson Davis said, hey, John Bell Hood, I want you to take your 50,000 guys, what's left of this army, and go out and attack that 180,000 guys, John Bell Hood said, okay, consider it done. And he did run out, and he did fight with the Union, and he got smacked right back into Atlanta. He also got wounded. By the end of the war, John Bell Hood was tied on his horse. He only had one arm and one leg. So, kind of hard job for these guys. Atlanta fell September 2nd, 1864. Now remember, the presidential election is the first Tuesday in November. So this is, even in those olden days with weaker communication, this is just in time for word to go north. Hey, Atlanta fell. There's been this huge Union victory. Looks like the end is near. We're going to win this thing. Maybe Lincoln was right. And the word can get out in all those little local newspapers and all throughout the countryside. And then the North is going to say, yeah, okay, maybe we should stick with this and get this done. We can pull the country together. As a result, this would sweep Abraham Lincoln back into office. What, hon? I don't know, you're taking the notes. You know there's a test. You write down what you think you need to write down. Okay. So what's left fighting for the Confederacy? I mean, Joe Johnston did get his army out. John Bell Hood had been shot up, so Joe Johnston's back in command. He did get what was left of his army out. He's racing away, and William Sherman is right on his tail, still trying to kill Confederates. So there's kind of a big army. There's kind of a big army up with Lee and Petersburg. Who else is fighting? The rest of the armies have been pretty well reduced, with one exception, maybe I guess two exceptions. One's 10,000, one's 15,000 men. But the rest of them are just guerrilla bands. Guerrilla, spelled like this, Guerrilla, which means when one side in a war doesn't have enough numbers to actually fight a battle against the other's army, all they can do is make little raids. Remember, like we talked about Francis Marion in the Revolution? Go out and shoot up a supply depot, go kill a couple of people out there chopping wood, go blow something up, then run back, hide. That's about all they could do. Well, that's what most of the Confederates were doing. But the war had torn up the Southern economy, and there were a couple different kinds of raiders. They were called raiders. For example, there was William Mosby. Mosby's raiders, they were legitimate. So, for example, if they had robbed an army payroll, got a hold of some Union gold, they, because they were legitimate warriors, would go ahead and try to turn that over to a Confederate government. So they were legitimate. They were fighting a war. But there were others like Quantrill's raiders. And Quantrill, you might recognize some of the names of some of the people in Quantrill's raiders, like Frank and Jesse James. You ever heard of Jesse James? Outlaw. He just, once the war was over, he kept doing what Quantrill's raiders were doing. Let's rob a train, let's rob a stage, let's rob a bank, because, hey, it's what we learned to do. Well, during the war, Quantrill's raiders, if they got a hold of, say, for example, an army payroll, they'd say, this is supposed to go to support the Confederate Army. And wait a minute, aren't we the Confederate Army? Hey, yeah, let's support us. They wouldn't really turn it over to the Confederate government, so they're kind of illegitimate. And as a result, the Union Army looked at these guys and said, okay, they're not real combatants, they're just thieves. And they issued an order saying, any Union outfit that catches a raider, you don't need a trial, just hang him from the next tree. Just hang the raider. Well, Mosby, who was legitimate, said, hey, you can't do this, we're really fighting a war, we just don't have an army to fight you with. And the Union commanders ignored him. So he issued an order. Any one of my raiders that catches a Union soldier, you don't need a trial, just hang him from the next tree. So after they'd hanged a few of the Union soldiers, the Union commanders backed off and said, okay, don't hang the raiders anymore. Take them as if they were prisoners of war. Okay, so this is it. Atlanta falls. The fate of the Confederacy is just about sealed. But there are some real hardcores left. They just won't give up on this. You know, looking at it realistically, they don't have enough men. The economy is just in a shambles. The North isn't going to let them go, particularly not if we get past the election and Lincoln is reelected. So their last hope is going out, but still they continue to fight on. And that's going to be important when we talk about tomorrow's lesson. Okay, notes are up for tomorrow's lesson. Why don't you get those into your notebook? Because you never know when there's going to be a notebook yet.